We're back with another Supercoach Mads podcast. Round 4 has come and gone. Price changes are in effect, so we'll go over some of the player comparisons. But before we get into that, we've got a quick little yet important announcement, which I'll hand over to Tom for.
So this is something we've decided to do to say a little bit thank you to the support that you guys have given over the last, basically from the kind of start of pre-season to now. I've been lucky enough for one of our kind of colleagues outside of Supercoach Mates to help donate this through. But we're going to be running a giveaway across the next 2 weeks. So it'll close Anzac Day, or when we record the podcast after the Anzac Day round. So our colleague's a bit of a sneak ahead. So we did a bit of a clean out the other weekend. He's donated a pair of shoes. I've got the box here. It's a pair of Jordans, if you can see it there. I don't know how this is going to work on camera. Give me a sec. So you got a pair there. Can't really see it, but it's a pair of Jordans. Over there. It's going to be, can't see that, but it's in the box. That'll be the major prize for the giveaway, and we'll chuck in a $30 AFL voucher for those that miss out. So there'll be 2 winners across the giveaway. So basically how it's going to work is once this podcast gets released, requirements are pretty simple, keeping it short and simple. It's something that we obviously thought would be a nice idea to give back a little bit, but also to continue to help grow, in particular, YouTube channel, because we want to do some YouTube exclusives moving forward and trying to grow that as best as we can. So all we require of you guys, if you're wanting to participate, will be as simple as subscribing. So liking this podcast coming out, subscribing to our channel, and commenting your favourite AFL team. So as long as you've got the 3 of that, you're entered into the draw. The first 100 people that do so we'll keep tabs on it, will be entered straight into the draw for the shoes, and that'll be announced live on the podcast. If you're unlucky and miss out on the first 100, then not to worry, you'll be entered into the draw for the $30 AFL voucher, and that'll be drawn as random live on the podcast as well. So it's simple as that. So if you're lucky enough, top 100 get in nice and quick. As soon as we release it, we'll release is the premiere, and we'll let you guys know on Twitter in advance. So not to worry, but yeah, when it comes out, first 100 get through. We'll do a random draw live on podcast in the next 2 weeks. And if you do miss out, there's a chance to win the $30 AFL voucher as well. So 2 prizes up for grabs, and the same bit of thank you for the support you've shown to allow us to grow the channel as best as we can. But moving forward, let me just quickly open up today's episode.
If you want some more info on the shoes and what you can potentially win, just head over to the Twitter page. We'll upload some photos and some further information about the shoes. So, make sure to suss that out.
So we'll move swiftly forward. Interesting round of footy. But first of all, with kicking off with our versus series, we've got Will Day and Alia as defensive options to bring in, with obviously the likes of Ridley being an absolute disappointment, and the recent use of Docherty, which we'll go into a lot more detail moving forward. But 2 players that, the reason I brought Alia into the conversation is having a look. He obviously did quite well on the weekend, but having a deeper look at his stats, he hasn't gone under 90 other than that 44 or whatever rounds. Will Day's got a newfound role in midfield and pretty much doing as best as a midfielder can at Hawthorn. What are your thoughts on these 2 if you're stuck for cash and looking at an option to bring in, say, for Ridley, where you're really struggling for cash and you need to look at that, 450 to 480 option?
Yeah, I think Day is a good option. The only issue is he's probably going to get the 2-week suspension. Perhaps that gets downgraded to 1. So obviously you can't trade him in at the moment. So 1 to potentially look at in the future. If you still got him, or you've had him from the start, it's been a good selection. I'd probably hold on to him for a bit longer. But at both of these players' prices, they're going to have to be keepers, and I have my doubts on Elias, especially because he plays full back role, which will lead to some poor scoring. So he's not going to be a top 6, even though he's been a solid starting pick so far. And Day he has more keeper potential, but still, I think you've missed those great starting scores and that money rise. Plus, he's playing for a bottom four team, so his scoring might not hold up. Plus, he's a younger body, so how's he going to last as the season wears on? We saw that with Tom Green last year, for instance, playing for a bottom team. Even though he's more developed than Day, he still ran out of gas. And whilst Day is a good runner,
Yeah.
is his body going to be able to withstand 24 rounds minus the 2 that he's been suspended? I'm not that confident, so I'd probably skip. But obviously, if you were picking one right now for this week, you're going Aaliyah because he's playing. But I prefer Day more as an option when he comes back. How about you?
So am I right in saying that he's been scrubbed out today for this weekend?
Yeah,
Or he's,
next 2.
yeah. Oh, next 2. Jeez. Yeah, I probably agree with your sentiment. It'd be nice if Day was available because he seems like he's just going to score naturally in that midfield role. He's pushed Walpole out. So yeah, Day would have been the obvious answer. But yeah, Lelia, I don't know. He's an interesting one. I think Port are going to get enough ball down there. He plays that kind of rebounding tall defender quite well. And so far, so good. He hasn't gone under, as I say, 91. So he obviously did very well on the weekend. And he obviously did that match-saving touch on the line to kind of save Port's ass a little bit. But he's also a bit volatile. This is obviously a 4-game sample size, so he's a bit risky. But if you're strapped for cash and want to go down, he's probably one of your best options. Moving forward, yeah, it's a tough one because obviously if Day was playing, you'd pick him. But yeah, Lelia off the premise that Day's scrubbed out for 2, and I think he's the best option around that 450k. Another one that actually brought my attention that I didn't include on here was Trent Rivers from Melbourne, who I don't think's gone under 80 or something. He scored quite well because Salon's not in the team at the moment, and he got his highest score of the round 123 against West Coast just gone by. So it's an interesting one, but yeah, Lelia for us out of those 2. Moving on to the next one. These are 2 players that obviously are defensive eligible. Again, with the whole conundrum around Docherty and some underperforming defensive premiums, one of which Mitch Duncan came back for his first game of the season, did disappoint, 116 Supercoach points, played that kind of Jake Lloyd-esque role of the past, and Jack Sinclair playing since in the midfield and defence. He's taken kickouts as well with Nazar Wanganeen Miller. I'll leave the Sinclair talk. I want to hear your opinion first before I ever chime in, but what are your thoughts on these 2 in particular? In particular, Duncan, who's now a defensive eligible option.
The Duncan pick, he's had so many injury problems, even as of late. So at 31 years of age, Chris Scott isn't afraid to sort of rest and manage these sort of players. So he's a player who's got a great role, good history of scoring, good ball user, but there's a few too many things that work against him, especially the durability factor. So for me, he's not a top 6, and at his price, which I'm pretty sure is pretty expensive, yeah, 486. At that price, you're picking him as a keeper, and I don't think he lasts for 24 rounds. So for me, he's a pretty easy pass because you're probably going to have to use a trade to get rid of him. Whereas Sinclair, he was a top scoring defender last year and he's continued this year quite well. So I like what he brings. The only issue is he's been playing a lot of midfield from what I've seen. And when Jack Steele comes back, he'll have to go back to half back and compete with Wanganeen Miller, which might see him potentially drop in scoring a bit. But he finds a fair few avenues to get points. So he's a top 6 defender. I'd be more than happy to pick him. He had that one poor game against Essendon, I believe, but otherwise has been incredibly good. But he has a break even of 154, so you can wait one more week. With that 63 last week or the week before still in his system, and pick him up for, if he scores 104, you can pick him up for 23k cheaper. So that's something you could potentially look at. But another thing is, the one thing that's drawing me away from picking Sinclair is he's got the first bye, and generally when you're picking these players now, it's a bit inconvenient because when that first bye comes and then you're looking for someone to pick up, you want to have options. And if you've already got these players in your team, you're not really going to be able to make upgrades in that week. So Sinclair's one that I might just leave until after he's played his bye and go from there.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. I mean, Sinks, obviously being a St Kilda supporter, watched him pretty closely. He's obviously filling that void a little bit with Steele gone. He's still spending stints in the defensive half. He just comes into midfield on a rotational basis. He seems to be scoring a little bit better in defence. Obviously, he scored very well, but obviously St Kilda smashed Gold Coast. So most midfielders scored pretty well. So he's one that as you said, it's a pretty high break even. So you probably wouldn't be getting him this week, especially coming up against Flyers, be a tough ask. So probably waiting another week would be beneficial on that. Duncan, little bit PTSD on because I brought him in a couple of years ago in the midfield and he absolutely ripped me a new one when he just kept getting injured on soft tissues. But he's one that, because he's defensive eligible, I'm pretty sure, makes him pretty enticing because he's very capable of scoring these 110s to 120s based on disposals and things like that, which was never really enough to warrant a top 6 to 8 selection. But as long as he can keep his body fit, then he'd be worthwhile a selection. But I definitely wait a week just because he'll be on the bubble the next one, on the bubble, but he'll be given his first price rise. Having said that, they play West Coast on the weekend as well, so he could get a very healthy score. So, if you want to take that early risk and you're desperate for, a swap, for a direct swap basically for Ridley, he's one that you could look at as a serious point of difference because he just gets the ball. He plays a real friendly halfback role where he just runs around and gets the ball, and he's quite effective by foot, and they like to utilise him off the halfback. So he's one to keep an eye on, that's for sure. But moving swiftly on, these are obviously 2 options you could potentially bring in if you're looking for a premium midfielder or using DPP with your Docherty out to swap around. 2 potential points of differences. Chad Warner had his best game of the season. He started pretty slowly. This is the first time he's kind of exploded. 137 and 30 disposal, 2 goals was huge from him. Zach Merritt obviously played the Giants, and last time they played it was a bit of a struggle. We're going on with the tag, I think it was Perriman that went on him. But what are your thoughts on these 2? And is it worthwhile bringing these, or someone of this ilk, maybe not these 2 in particular, but someone around that price point, or is it just worthwhile just going straight up to a Clary, for example?
I do see the merit in picking one of these sort of players because you do save 130k. It's just tough. I wouldn't go Warner yet. He's too inconsistent to be a top 8 mid at this rate. And Merritt has had a pretty soft start to the season. By soft, I mean he's come up against some weak midfield teams and hasn't really set the world alight. So I'd be looking at someone around Merritt's price, perhaps, if you were that way inclined, like a Josh Kelly or someone like that, LDU. I prefer over someone like Zach Merritt because he also has the ability to get tagged, as he did in round 1. So for me, I would be skipping on both. I do prefer picking someone around this price range to Oliver though, because you're losing out. You're paying 700k. You're basically forfeiting the points, or you're forfeiting the money, but you're also forfeiting the points to the players who already have Oliver. So you're sort of not really gaining an advantage. Whereas, say you pick a 600k mid and they match Oliver, or Oliver drops a bit, you can then pick up Oliver and not lose out on not having started with Oliver. So that's probably the way I'm thinking. But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'll come from a perspective of being strapped for cash and saying a direct swap for someone in this price range. Probably just risk it on Warner. I think Merritt hasn't been overly impressive in his first 4 games with regards to ceiling. I think 111 was his highest score. In fact, he's really struggled to get going from a point scoring capability, and Warner's very capable of showing that he can get his 140s, but he's a bit of a roller coaster at the moment, as are the Swans. So yeah, I'd say flip of the coin between the 2 directly, but I'd probably say Warner. Could see him, as I've said there, could be something a start of something big for him in the next couple of weeks if he can get off the leash a little bit and really utilise his running powers through the midfield. But moving forward, the two ruckmen, Tim English, everyone who doesn't have him just want him concussed, I think, at this point, because he just gets 140s after 140s. And Sean Darcy obviously has rebounded quite effectively after having a pretty shit start. Went berserk, obviously, against Ruckless West Coast and backed it up pretty impressively against an Adelaide ruckman in O'Brien and scored 125. What are your thoughts, A, on the necessity of English? Say you've got a Darcy and you probably feel like you want to trade him just to get the extra 20 points, or do you feel like that Darcy can kind of keep this form up and it's worthwhile holding on to him even though your English is popping off?
It's a tough one because Darcy's scored some back-to-back good scores. I'd still hold Darcy for a few more weeks and see if he can sort of maintain a good scoring pattern, because his break even's pretty low. Whilst it's sort of hurting, in theory, I think there are bigger problems most people would be having with premiums this week than, say, a Sean Darcy who's scoring 125. I don't see Darcy as a keeper though, so that's something you'd probably want to look out for. But at the moment, I'd be holding and sort of just hoping that he keeps this up. But having said that, he's going to come up against Witts soon and a few other decent ruckmen, which might negate some of his scoring, whereas English has Lycett this week and should go pretty big. So I wouldn't be wasting a trade just yet, because it's a 130k upgrade, which I think you could probably utilize that so much more effectively. Like, for instance, if you got Ridley, going to Dawson, I think will generate a bigger points gain than Darcy to English. But if you got no other problems and for some reason you got 130k and haven't really burned any trades, for sure it's a move that will net you some extra points.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I'm in this boat at the moment because I've still got Darcy. I held him. It's a bit of a tricky one because I've just brought up the fixtures here. So Freo play Gold Coast this week. It'd be hard. Yeah, you wouldn't be complaining if you got rid of Darcy this week, especially if Witts comes back. But if Witts misses another week for whatever reason, you'd probably almost stick a VC on Darcy because how capable he is. And then the week after, the Dogs actually play Freo, so they will play against each other, which will be interesting if you trade out Darcy and he goes bang, bang against English. It's a tough one, but I guess if you're in a position where you don't have Docherty, you don't have, say, a Ridley, and you have a Darcy still, maybe it's worth just flicking it to English because he has got Lycett and he could go nuts against Lycett. Having said that, Lycett could try and negate him around the ground a little bit. So it's a tough one, but it's probably not worth the trade. As you said, it's a fair bit of money to go up. So you need essentially two trades. Or if you have a Primo, go down one up, basically, and you've kind of used it as a correctional trade, but it's a fair bit to pay for someone who's Darcy is very capable and seems like he's going up and up at the moment. But before we move on to the overrated, underrated section, two forward, not premiums, forward mid prices at this point, who have scored pretty well for mid prices. One being Machado Owens, who went absolutely berserk against Gold Coast and probably stamped his credentials as a very serious forward threat moving forward. Max Holmes, who was pretty much the only Cats player who showed any sort of speed in the midfield. Both timed up, but both have kind of gone a little bit up and down in the score. And having said that, they really haven't gone below 70. What are your thoughts on these two as genuine options moving forward? If you feel like they can just keep going and make a bit of money, or if you jump on now, it's almost too late.
Yeah, you have missed a big price rise from both of them, especially Owens. But there aren't too many rookies that are going to be making cash in the short term. So this is a sort of move I'd potentially consider if, for instance, you have a Setterfield and a Ridley and you want to get a premium but also a rookie off the field. I think this is the only case you do this. So, for instance, say you have Setterfield and Ridley and you want to get to Dawson but you don't want to be fielding, say, a Mackenzie on field or a Noah Long or a Fergus Green on field. You pick up an Owens and hope that that sort of propels you up the ranks. That's the only time I'd be doing this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be looking at getting these players in because this is sort of like the upgrade time. You want to be upgrading your team. These guys aren't going to be in your team for the foreseeable future. They're purely there to sort of keep a rookie off the field. So if that's your purpose, to sort of keep a Fergus Green off the field, then by all means do this if it also allows you to get a premium. Otherwise, I wouldn't be wasting my time. I'd just be getting a premium and saving myself the hassle of having to upgrade them again.
Yeah, I think at this point, both the price in that 300 to 400k brackets, you'd almost be seeing them as a kind of lucky ditch primo. If you're strapped for cash, I mean, Mitch Owen just showed how, ridiculously talented he can be up forward. And he pushed up the ground quite effectively, so he gets his disposals. And he's seriously talented as a kind of key forward that's very mobile, very similar to Jeremy Cameron in the way he plays at the moment. And Max Holmes playing full-time mid at the moment. And he just will score naturally, I think. But moving swiftly ahead to our underrated, overrated section, we'll kick off a pretty
just interestingly, just quickly.
Yeah.
So Mitch Owens, it says he had 5 hitouts. Did you notice much of that? And could you see him pinch hitting in the ruck a bit?
He pretty much, so to answer your question, you're right. He does pinch hit in the ruck. Playing forward, he's 193, I think, so he's a big boy. And as a 19-year-old, that's a freakish talent to have with what he does. I think the benefit with him, if you want to go down this route, you kind of have to stick with him and stick fat with the shit scores he might get moving forward. But a big benefit he gets, when Membry comes back, he'll play as a third tall pretty much. At the moment, he's basically playing as the second tall. Ace Cordy doesn't really count. Zane Cordy doesn't really count. He's playing as decoy forward. But Mitch Owens is pretty much playing as a second tall. And at the rate this is going, I think if Membry comes back in this week, all of a sudden Owens gets a bit of a mismatch going forward. So he's one that, gets utilised as a backup ruckman a little bit. I don't think that'll contribute to his score that much, but it is handy that he gets thrown in the middle a bit. I could see him utilised very similar to Sean Grigg, where rather than going third up, they use him as a midfield capable ruckman who basically negates the ruckman as best as he can, but then comes on the ground and dominates. Because what I've noticed watching games live with him, he's a ridiculously mobile player for his height. As I said, very similar to the way Jeremy Cameron plays. So he's one to look out for. I think if you want to pull the trigger, this is definitely the week to do it because of his ridiculous low break even. But don't expect him to score 140 each week. I mean, it's a good return for 27 disposals and 2 goals. It wasn't like he was reliant on 6 goals or whatnot, but 27 disposals is a shed load of the ball, which is very effective if the Saints can keep it up moving forward.
He's going to have a tough next 2 weeks against Carlton and Collingwood.
Yeah.
He's been scoring well, but he's been scoring well in 4 wins. So when St Kilda are in a tight contest, it might mean that he gets less points. But in saying that, after St Kilda, Carlton, the draw sort of opens up again, and they've got North, Adelaide, GWS, Hawthorn before the bye. So there's, by all means, he could go huge there. It's more risk-free reward, but if he's, as I said before, if he's putting 50 points on Fergus Green and you've got that guy on field, then that's a pretty big win.
Yeah. I mean, I'd almost be, obviously pull the trigger now, but if not, you just see how he goes against a stronger opposition in Carlton Collingwood. If he does well there, then by all means go for it, because I think he could end up being pretty strong and he has the capability of going 150. But moving forward to our overrated, underrated section, first one off the cap is raid trade premiums who aren't scoring to their price tag. Obviously, Docherty is now an interesting category, which I guess we could talk in this section, but obviously someone like a Ridley, who was priced at just under 500, but he's spitting out scores of 80s to 90s. What do you do in this scenario? Is it one to wait, or is it one just bite the bullet and get rid when you can, when they've got a bit of value in their price? What are your thoughts?
With players like this, I can understand why you'd hold Laird, because Laird is an uber premium who's capable of still averaging 120. players like Ridley, he's spending a lot of time on the bench. His role just isn't up to scratch. His scoring obviously shows that as well. I think you're almost treading water by just holding him. I'd be getting rid of him.
Yeah.
And getting in someone who's scoring 20, 25 points above what Ridley's averaging at the moment. Docherty obviously is also a natural trade because he's injured. If he wasn't injured, I'd be more inclined to hold Docherty, definitely more than Ridley, because Docherty has a better role. And I feel like a few weeks ago, he still racked up the ball, whereas Ridley's role has been pretty similar throughout the
Yeah.
4 weeks, and his scoring has matched that. And I don't think much is going to change. Whereas with Docherty, he moves all over the ground and has the ability to score. Hasn't yet, but he could have had he not gotten injured. Whereas Ridley's probably going to keep spitting out these numbers, so I'd be rage trading him. How about you?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, Ridley's gone for me. I've watched enough of this shit to realise that I don't think I can hold him through any longer. He plays basically as a second or third tall. They've given up on trying to get through the ball every time to him. They're utilising the likes of McGrath, D'Ambrosio when he is playing, and Redmond. Redmond's basically the killer for him. I just don't think. Ridley's a ridiculously good kick, but they're using too many halfbacks that can run now. Run and carry, they're using Ridley as more of a one-on-one interceptor, which he just doesn't get enough the ball. Unfortunately, he did spend a weirdly amount of time on the bench, a big time on the bench against GWS, which was annoying because he would have scored 100 if that wasn't the case, I think. But yeah, it's frustrating, and I don't think it's worthwhile now when you've still got a bit of value just to trade. But I'll give you one more question quickly. Your thoughts on Docherty? Obviously, he's a trade out with his meniscus injury. Unfortunately for owners, because he's been quite disappointing so far. But what are your thoughts on, obviously you've got Dawson, but yeah, because he's dropped so much in cash, he's I think 525. Is it worthwhile trying to find some money to get up to say a Dawson and get rid of it, or get away with just biting the bullet a little bit? But would it also be kind of a situation where you might go a little bit different? Two names stand out in mind that have done ridiculously well so far as well is Luke Ryan, who hasn't gone under 100, and I think Adam Sard hasn't gone under 100 as well, and could even do better now with Docherty out for a while with monopoly on kickouts and things like that. What are your quick thoughts on a trade out option for Docherty?
Luke Ryan is a big no. I think he's actually injured, so I'd skip that.
Right. Yeah.
Sard that's not confirmed, but there's been rumors that he is. Sard I like, and I probably will pick. The only issue is Adelaide tagged Sard, so he's probably going to have a poor score this week. But in saying that, he plays a similar role to Dacos, where he loves to get a kick in. He's used so often, it's ridiculous. Plus now there's one less mouth to feed in the back line with Docherty out of there. So Sard's just going to dominate, you'd think. Plus, it feels annoying picking someone like a Sicily now or a Sinclair now who still have a high break even. So I'd be looking at a Sard, and if you don't have Dawson, he'd be priority one, followed by Sard. And I think if you don't, for whatever reason, if you don't have Dacos, I wouldn't be picking Dacos anymore because everyone has him, and you've missed out on those points. And now you're just like conceding defeat basically and going with the pack who are already ahead of you.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Moving forward, so this is an interesting one based on how these two went the weekend as mobile key forwards. But trading in key forwards, I put them in quotation marks because it really depends on how you define them. But essentially, mobile key forwards or those forwards that can push up a little bit off the ground, higher up the ground, who can score huge. Obviously, standard Rosie, whatnot, Goulden, Taranto. If you have a spot opened up for your forwards and that's something you're looking to bring in, is it worthwhile going one of these guys who are capable of scoring 140s and 50s, especially someone like a Cameron who went absolutely berserk on the weekend, and he's capable of playing well up the field, so he has the ability to get the disposals?
Yes, but not this early on in the season. With Owens, perhaps because of his price, but with Cameron, he's the sort of player you look at when you're trying to win a league matchup in the grand final or whatnot, or you're having him as a loophole sort of option at F7 where If he scores well on your bench, you chuck on a non-playing player from F8 on the field and put your F6 on the bench. That's the only real instance I'd be doing it. But Cameron's been in amazing form. It's just, I don't know. He's going to have a game where he doesn't kick a goal and scores 50, for instance, and then you'll look a bit foolish for picking him because, yeah, key forwards, they're going to have games where they go big and they'll have games where they don't kick a goal and score 40, like we've seen with Ben King and Oscar Allen already.
Mhm.
So that's just the role and the natural thing. So resist the temptation to pick these players, and once you've got a full team, then these are the sort of players you pick when they have that high ceiling but low floor.
Yeah, exactly right. I think there's a time and a place for key forwards, and probably early in the season is quite risky because you want to get these nailed on premiums right. But moving to our last overrated, underrated before we get on to Nathan's nags, even though he's not here tonight, but we'll cover that accordingly, is trading out rookies early to get into a primo. So two that spring to mind is Mackenzie and Ginby, who both scored poorly for respective reasons, mainly because of opposition. What are your thoughts on that? Overrated, underrated, with regard to getting them out, say, this week when they got maybe a little bit more money to make, or especially more money if they spike back up in score, to get to your, say, Dawson's, if you're able to do that, to go down to, say, a Van Ruin this week?
I think cash is king, and whilst points are important, there aren't that many good downgrade options this week.
Yeah.
Van Rooyen's the best one, but he scored only a 53 on the weekend, so he's not going to make a whole heap of money. Whereas these guys have great job security, great roles. Mackenzie less so. And whilst they scored poorly one week, they could bounce back. So especially with Gimby, I'd be holding 100%. Mackenzie gets you the player you really want. You can go for it, but I'd be treating with caution because we've seen in the past when we've traded out rookies early because of one poor score that's come back to bite people. For instance, Nick Dacos, I traded him out 350k. He ends up being a keeper. James Jordan did it a few years ago as well. So there's by all means these two have the ability as high draft picks to burn you like that as well. So I'd be holding at least one more week. If
Yeah.
either of them scores sub 50 again and their break even rises above their average, then you can confidently trade them out to a player. I don't think there are even that many premiums who are going to, apart from Stewart, have a really low break even either. So it's not going to cost you too much.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. I think, yeah, you'd be having to be in a good position if you were to trade these out early to kind of kickstart your primo upgrade cycle a bit earlier. But it's not worth the risk often when maybe if they get consecutive bad scores and they start to lose money, that's a different story altogether. But if they're kind of on a lowish break even, just kind of keep them as long as you can to maximize your cash growth. But moving on to our final segment with the person, it's one person who's not here today, Nathan's nag. So obviously, yeah, he's one that usually rips into them, but because he's not here, we'll do the duty for him. We'll talk. I'll let you talk about Cornelio, but obviously Freo, I think, be a weekly fixture into Nathan's rants as long as they keep losing. They've been beyond shocking, I think. As Nathan mentioned, I know Nathan's mentioned that they're basically a fake side with regards to the way they are going about their footy. They kind of don't defend at all. And yeah, it's disappointing. It probably doesn't help super coaches because the likes of Brayshaw is just really stinking it up. I know he did well on the weekend, but he's been really dead average. Basically, no other Freo players are really relevant at the moment. And the only reason why the defenders are doing anything or any sort of scoring is that the ball gets sent down their way that often. It's ridiculous. But I think the more frustrating thing from an owner perspective was how Darcy was dumped in the forward line earlier this year. So hopefully Longmire's learnt his lesson to never send him up forward again and just play him in the ruck where he's best utilised. But yeah, I don't think the Jackson and Darcy combo has worked out nowhere near as well as what they expected. I think it's suffering how they structure up because their forward line looks an absolute shambles at the moment. But another player who's been beyond disappointing for the last 2 weeks at least, and you can talk about this a little bit, Jonas, is Cornelio, who's gone, I think, sub-70s for both 2 weeks. What are your thoughts on Cornelio and what do you think is the issue down there at GWS at the moment with him in particular, considering he came in as a second or third highest forward at 553k to start off the season?
Yeah, it's a strange one. It looks like he's just in a bit of a form slump, to be honest, because he's got the role. Some of the other midfielders are scoring fine around him, and he just hasn't been able to perform really well. He's had 25 touches on the weekend, but 5 clangers, only 9 contested possessions. Yeah, so for me, it's a bit of a concern, but because the role's so good, and maybe slightly less so when Perriman comes in, but he's still got the majority of the CBAs in the mid-time. He's one you're holding.
Yeah.
Certainly someone you could look at trading in a few weeks if his price gets to a really juicy sort of point. But it's something you just have to ride out. I believe he's 29. He did this last year as well, where he'd have good patches and bad patches. So you just got to hope he rediscovers that form and gets back to those 120s. After week 1, he was one of the main people I wanted to bring in. So it's amazing what 2 to 3 weeks can do to someone in terms of like your perception of them. So not really on my radar at the moment, but if he finds some form again and say Tom Green gets injured or Josh Kelly, which is a very real possibility, gets injured and he has like 90% of the CBAs, he's naturally going to score. He just needs to clean up that disposal efficiency a tiny bit. And also GWS need to win a few games. It doesn't help that he's on a losing side. So
Yeah.
one where like I'm far less concerned with being an owner of Cornelio than I would be if I had Ridley or Docherty, for instance. But you would certainly be hoping for a bounce back game.
Yeah, 100%. You'd be frustrated as an owner, considering that, you know, your likes of Kelly, Green, those others in the midfield are doing a lot better than what he's doing. But he's kind of known for these form slumps, unfortunately, so hopefully he can bounce back. But that's all we've got time for today. We've kind of try and keep pretty brief. But, yeah, so goes live. We'll obviously post on Twitter the instructions of how to enter the giveaway and hope to win some prizes. Just to make it also very clear as well, if you do decide, you are one of the lucky 100 that get in early for the shoes prize, by no means, if you don't want the shoes and want the AFL voucher instead, that's, you know, obviously an option as well. You don't have to be forced to choose the shoes if you don't want to go down that route. But hopefully one of you guys are lucky enough to win. And so there are 2 prizes, and it's a bit of a thank you for showing the support and allowing us to grow our channel accordingly. But until then, we'll catch you next week. So after another exciting week of footy, and it'll be interesting how the gather round goes. But until then, we'll see you next episode.